Sioux Bowl. Kelly moved this team 60 yards in 2 minutes and 8 seconds.
Good job, we're gonna move on it. Good job, Jim.
The quiet man of this football team, Scott Norwood. He can fire the shot heard round the world now. Oh boy, hearts beat faster in Buffalo. This shot will be 47 yards. Reich waiting for the snap. Puts it down on the way. It's long enough. And it is no good. He missed it to the right with 4 seconds to play.
The 27 moves, going to throw for it. He's got plenty of time. Throwing it out to the left. It's intercepted. Nate Olaf's at the 36-yard line, still on his feet. Breaking to the outside, now coming back inside. And he'll be brought down at the 35-yard line by Haywood Jeffries.
Greatest comeback in playoff history. It's down! It's down!
It'll be a 3rd down play coming up, and Steve Christie is coming into the game. The Bills spent a lot of money to get him, and now he gets his shot from about 31 yards. Bills can win it here. Reich puts it down. The kick is on the way, and it is good! And the Bills have won it! The Bills have won it!
Welcome to the Jackson Center. Here you were, Illinois center guard. What does Dick Butkus mean to an Adam Lingner?
It's funny that you would ask that. I just got, I guess it was a year ago, September, I just got the chance to meet Dick Butkus because I went back to the campus. They did a bunch of renovations to the stadium, and I got the chance to go back because I was voted by the fans as one of the 10 greatest special teams players in Illinois football history.
Congratulations.
I don't think it was all so much what I did at Illinois. I think it was what I did afterwards and had a nice long NFL career. But because I was back there, Dick Butkus, obviously one of the Illinois greats, I got to meet him, and I told him the story about when I was a kid growing up in Illinois. So growing up in Illinois, the Chicago Bears are the team you see every week, and I probably didn't see him in his prime, but because I couldn't find a Butkus jersey in any of the stores, I went out and I bought a black t-shirt, and I went to the athletic store and bought some iron-on numbers, and I made myself a Dick Butkus jersey. So he was my hero growing up, and I didn't even see him in his prime, really.
51, right? Wasn't that his number?
That was.
So that's what yours was.
I did have a year in Kansas City when I went back to Kansas City that I wore 51. When I was down at Champaign, I was 55, so down at the University of Illinois.
When you got drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, was Marv there then? Marv Levy?
No, actually it was the year, 82 was his last season there. And so I think he might have had a little bit of an influence there because they let him go kind of later than normal in the process. So when Coach Makovic came in, I think he really had to rely on, to a great degree for the draft, on what the previous staff had put together. So he wasn't directly involved, but I think there was probably some involvement there, though.
So with the Chiefs for 4 years. When you were drafted, was your role going to be part of specialty teams, or was it going to be a center guard, offensive lineman?
I was a young, undersized, athletic lineman that had potential. As it turned out, I only started one game as a center, and it was a throwaway game against the San Diego Chargers, so I never really developed into a full-time starting offensive lineman. But when they drafted me, I think they had hopes that I could be, but never could just get big enough and strong enough to, to play those 60, 70 downs, a game and have that kind of impact. But I was able to long snap and contribute to the team that way. And on special teams, when I was a young guy of 255 and I could run pretty good, I was on the kickoff return team and knocking people around and, having fun that way. But the one thing that was kind of interesting is when I first got to Kansas City, I actually went out on the field and worked with Nick Lowry. I was snapping balls and, for field goal operation. And I come up after, putting some extra time in on the field and run into Coach Makovic, and he says, "Adam, you're a pretty good long snapper." Oh, like, "Thanks, Coach." But on the back of my mind, I'm thinking, I would have thought you knew that about me, so you drafted me. But so I was really happy to be able to contribute and be an active part of the team. Although I was always pushing, especially those first 4 years, to try to be a full-time starting center.
How does one learn to be a long snapper? I mean, you were really one of the preeminent players known for that. It's not something you pick up easily. I mean, I used to be a center, and
Oh yeah,
I was a failure.
So you speak from experience.
But I was a failure completely. Any of the snapping, long snapping, punts, field goals. How did you pick that up, and how did you really get good at this?
When I was a freshman in high school, Coach George, the head coach of the freshman team at Alleman High School, where I grew up, he said, "Adam, throw me that ball." And I was maybe 10 yards away from him, so I just grabbed it, and rather than straightening back up and throwing it over just like a quarterback would, I just had the ball in my hands, so I bent over, threw it through my legs, and for some odd reason he threw the ball back to me. Yeah. And he said, "Do that again." And so it was that following weekend that I was snapping punts for the freshman team, and by the time I was a sophomore, I was snapping field goals for the varsity after I'd play both ways and do all the snapping for the sophomore team. We didn't have a JV team, we had a sophomore team. So I'd actually suit up for 2 games, which isn't legal anymore. Right. But and as I was telling one of the members of the staff here, is that then when I did go to high school football, my coach was Wayne DeSutter, who actually played a year with the Bills in 1966. Mm-hmm. But then he got drafted, went off to the Vietnam War, and when he came back, wasn't able to get back into the league. So over in Rock Island, Illinois, I just happened to be coached by Wayne DeSutter, who had a year out here with the Buffalo Bills.
You found your way from Kansas City then to the Patriots.
Wow, you've done your homework.
No, it says here.
For 5 days.
Is that right?
5 days.
And then the Patriots flipped you to the Bills?
How it turned out was that in my 4th year in the league, after 12 games, I got cut, which is really unusual. Usually if you make that final cut, there's a pretty high odds that you're going to make it through the season. Mm-hmm. But we had a guy who came off of injured reserve, and they decided to make room for him. They decided to let me go, even though I was the guy doing all the snapping, which is what really sort of made it unusual. But so that was like the week before Thanksgiving. So I got a call on the morning before Thanksgiving, and the Patriots called, said, "Adam, we actually signed somebody else, but he didn't get off the plane." So we don't know where this guy is. It was actually Billy Bain, yeah, who was he was a left tackle for Eric Dickerson when he was racking up all of that yardage back in the the 80s. And so they said, "Will you come out? We might just send you right back home if this guy shows up, but just in case, we need to have somebody." And the reason they called me is because my offensive line coach in Kansas City had just gone out to New England, so he knew that in an emergency, if a couple guys got hurt and we had to throw our 3rd backup lineman in there, that at least Adam would know the calls enough to be able to get the plays from the line of scrimmage. And so, but as soon as they could get somebody bigger, stronger, and not be in such an emergency situation, that's why they let me go. And I actually had an opportunity to sign with Buffalo a week later. It was the last week of the season. I came up just thinking I was coming up for a workout to maybe sign me for the following year. And for some reason, I ended up in a hotel for 2 or 3 days. And I finally came in and said, "Coach Levy, I'm sitting around in a hotel. What's going on?" And he said, "Well, we're trying to find a spot for you on the roster." And as any smart salesman will do, you first say really nice things about the person. So I told Coach Levy, I said, "Coach," I said, "Tom Condon, who was a veteran guy in the league that took me under his wing when I was in Kansas City. I said, Tom Condon told me that you're a great guy and that I can shoot really straight with you, and so I'm going to do that." And I said, "I don't really need this check." I said, "I've got 13 games in, and I'm only missing a few here at the end. I'd really rather, if you don't mind, just sort of take the time to look around the league and see who's going to be the best fit for me. And of course, what did I do? I signed with the team that offered me the most money, which was Denver. Denver cut me about halfway through the preseason. That was in '87, and Coach Levy picked me up off of waivers in '87 and brought me in. So it was a really tough negotiating tactic. Denver gave me more money, and my contract came with me, so it was a way to, I guess, get my contract up a little higher than what Buffalo was offering.
You come with Coach Levy, and this is in 1989, I guess. Did you get a sense that you were just on the cusp of big things?
Well, actually, I came in 87
right.
and really thought, it was interesting because my wife, you know, we met at...
that's when Kelly started, right? Didn't Jim just come in that year?
86 was his first year, and that was the year that Coach Levy split with Hank Bulla. You know, he took over halfway through the season for Hank Bulla. And the thing that was, you know, interesting about my situation coming out to Buffalo is when I got cut, you know, and then picked up on waivers, I called my wife and said, "Marcy, your worst nightmare's been realized. We're going to Buffalo." And I said that way because at that time, you know, in 83, 84, 85, I mean, that's where guys went to sort of end their career. It was sort of your last hope to have a career was Buffalo. Well, what I didn't know was that was really about to change. And as excuse me, as soon as I got to Buffalo, I called Marcy back and I said, "Marcy, you are going to love it here." And the reason is, you know, we were just starting to put the pieces together, and the fans were so fired up. So to come from Kansas City, where we might get 30,000 people at the game, and 28 of those 1,000 people bought their tickets to yell at you in a very negative way, it was nice to come to Buffalo and have the people just being really excited about Buffalo Bills football. And so we were really happy. And once we got here, we just really determined we wanted to stay here long term and raise our kids here. And we've done that. We've got our youngest daughter just finishing her senior year in high school.
Terrific, terrific. During that time period, that entered the Shane Collins, the Cornelius Bennetts, Talley, I guess, had already been there. Again, was there a tipping point that you could sense, Adam, that we're now going in not only the absolute right direction, but we're going to find ourselves at the pinnacle here? Is there a game, part of a season, something that you said?
I don't think I saw it on the front end, but you look back and you see a couple of key things that happen. Mm-hmm. I think, excuse me, bringing you know, Cornelius Bennett in, getting Thurman Thomas were a couple of key positions that really just made us formidable. And of course, because we already had Jim, we already had some other, you know, other pieces in place. Andre was already here, Darryl Talley, you know, was already here, and so Bruce Smith was already here. You know, so there was a really good core of people. But you know, one of those turning points, I think, was like in 1990 when we scored 3 touchdowns in 1 minute and 20 seconds. So what you learn as a player with that type of output so quickly is that you're never out of a game. Right. You know, and part of that too is just the strong will of Jim Kelly, who just really refused to lose. You know, I look at the team now and I watch the team. I'm trying to figure out who is that person. Who is that person is just going to will a win because they refuse to lose? And I'm still waiting to see if we have one. Maybe there is, and I just can't tell from the sidelines.
You find yourself in the first Super Bowl. Well, actually, you found yourself in 2 divisional playoff games. One against the Browns, which was sort of the first time in a long time where the Bills fans could actually see a sense of a playoff lost.
At the end of the 89 season you're talking about, and the ball slipping through the hands of, I can't remember his name, Ronnie Harmon? I was kidding about not being able to remember his name. I just
saw the movies the other day. So.
Yeah. But
and then 90 again. Now you're really starting to taste it here.
Well, I think we learned an important lesson from that game, which was we're going to do a lot better if we can win 1 or 2 more games during the regular season and play more of our playoff games at home. Right. You know, and that was really our push for the next 2 or 3 years was, hey, home field advantage. As much as we can have control over it, we want to have it. And so it takes you from a position where you're just happy to be in the playoffs to where you're like, no, we want to set ourselves up so that we can win the whole thing. You know, and that's, you know, sort of how you evolve, and especially when you have a really talented group of players that have been, like you said, sort of on the edge of it, and you get that little taste of it, and you know you have the talent to go farther.
I'm going to throw out a few names before we get into some specific games, just maybe an anecdote, a vignette or something like that, but Darryl Talley.
Well, I don't know if I can share this, but I'm gonna. Darryl Talley, the thing, and this isn't football related. Darryl Talley, if you see a picture of Darryl during his playing years, one of the most, I don't know if I can say it, but he's not the best looking guy in the world, and somehow you look at his daughters, it's like, they're Darryl. You know, they're just female versions of Darryl. They're beautiful. And so there's this odd mystery. How can somebody who's so challenged that way create this offspring that is so beautiful, and when they have his features? But to get more serious though about Darryl, if I were to have to go to war, I would want Darryl in my foxhole. You know, he's that guy. I had the opportunity just to talk to him one time with my daughter, and she's a volleyball player, and he was talking about how he liked to approach the game and how he was trying to encourage his own daughter to play volleyball with that same sort of attitude. And it was the attitude that I just want to dominate that person that's in front of me, to the point at the end of the game I've broken their will and they just don't want to play against me anymore. And it was so funny because my daughter, you know, this was an evening where we were just out having a nice dinner, and she's like, I want to play volleyball right now. Because, you know, he's that kind of person that just inspires you, you know, to play at the highest level.
Cornelius Bennett.
Cornelius, I think Bruce Smith had to be the happiest person in the world when Cornelius Bennett came to our team, because he was just so athletic, and he had that rush around the corner that took so much of the heat off of Bruce. They couldn't just slide to one side and try to double team Bruce all the time. And I think he was just such an important acquisition to rounding out our defense. It just made us so much more balanced, having Bruce on one side, Cornelius on the other side. And now I just ran into him over the alumni weekend, and it was really fun to see how he's just sort of progressed in his life. And now he's working a great deal on retired players' issues. And I didn't know him well enough as a player and a teammate, maybe because he was, you know, I was with the offensive line and he's on the other side of the ball, just to realize how committed he was at that time. I didn't realize how committed he was to his teammates and to his fellow players, and he's really enjoying that role now, and it's neat to see.
Bruce?
Bruce is challenging to talk about.
Yeah.
A great player, led by example of playing at a great level, but I think he probably could have even been greater. Because he tended, you know, to have his moments where he was a little too focused on himself. But I also may not even know him as well as I know some of the other guys. So just like with Thurman Thomas, it took me 2 years to figure out that when Thurman was joking. For the first couple of years I thought, God, this guy's kind of a jerk. But it took me 2 years to sort of spend enough time with him that I realized most of the time he's joking around, you know? And so I don't know if I know really even Bruce well enough, you know, to sort of give the impression that he's sort of selfish, but he sure played at a really high level for a long time, and I definitely wouldn't want to be across the line, you know, from Bruce. And he definitely, you know, made our team, you know, better, and definitely deserved to go into the Hall of Fame.
Shane Conlon?
Shane has the most interesting head diameter to ankle diameter ratio in NFL history. Big head, very skinny ankles. But I'm hoping that he'll see this, so he'll know I'm busting on him.
They all have, from Steve Christie to Eddie Abramowski.
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah. In fact, just Eddie Abramowski tells stories on everybody, and we got to the same type of programmer at Darryl Talley and Bruce Smith. And he tells a story of one day where Bruce Smith was on the ground. He had been hit by some, halfback in the back of his legs, and he was screaming.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
When Talley came up and a couple of expletives, said, "Come on, you got hit by a 180-pound guy. What kind of, blah blah blah.
Right.
How do you think you are? Get your ass up and let's play ball." And of course you did. It just kind of took that Darryl Talley.
Well, yeah, and to get back to Bruce and Darryl. Darryl made Bruce a better player because Darryl was willing to sort of at times cover for Bruce. If the call was supposed to go a certain way as far as what gap Bruce was going to hit, but he saw something in their alignment and stuff, and he wanted to take the gap that really wasn't part of the scheme, he would tell Darryl what he was doing. They had their signals, and Darryl would compensate for what Bruce had decided to do on his own, sort of improvising on the defense. Well, that's risky,
right.
But Darryl was willing to do it because Bruce studied a lot of film, and he prepared really well, so I think he figured there's probably a good reason he's going to do it, but not all linebackers are going to give their defensive ends that kind of freedom and then try to compensate in their responsibilities to allow them to do it. So it was a great partnership over there between those two guys, but Darryl's probably the only guy that could have said something like that to Bruce, since they really had a good working relationship over there.
Were you the number 2 guy behind Kent Hull?
I always liked to think that I was, but I wasn't.
So if Hull went down, who were these?
In fact, we would carry maybe 8 guys, offensive linemen. Well, I was the 8th, which means, if 3 guys get hurt, I'm in the game. Well, there was only one time in my 8 years with Buffalo that happened, and they put Pete Metzelars in.
The center? Or just
I think they just shuffled everybody around, and Pete ended up at left tackle for a couple plays at the end of the game. Yeah. But I like to think it's because these fingers were so valuable, they just didn't want me to jam them into some defensive lineman's chest and get them all bent and crooked like a couple of them are. What's
the technique? You got the field goals that. They want to come up the middle on you and that stuff. What did you fear the most, or just worry about the most?
Really, the scariest moment I can recall was the first time that we faced what I called the tidal wave, which was they put a guy on my head, they put a guy in my gap, they put a guy on the shoulder of Howard Ballard, and nobody knocked Howard over. I mean, Howard was just huge. And then they put, behind those 3 guys, they put 2 guys to push them. They committed 5 guys, half of the defensive squad, to 1 gap. Wow. Well, I snapped it, and I immediately went flat onto my back. Howard was flat on his back. But the operation was smooth, and they didn't block it. But it was just like, oh my God, oh my gosh. And because I'd never seen Howard get flat back before. I was used to it. It happened to me all the time. I was undersized, and every once in a while they'd catch me. But to see Howard go down was kind of a shock. But shortly after that, they changed the rules so that you could fake an extra point even. So no team could commit 5 guys to a gap anymore. Right. And once you saw those guys standing behind the others, you kind of knew, well, you better lean forward. Because the one thing that's a challenge about protecting for a field goal is you don't want to go forward. You don't want to go back, but you don't want to go forward either. Because if you go forward and your buddy gets knocked back, there's a seam, and you have the potential for a block. So, but you just knew when there's a whole bunch of guys in behind, you might want to put your weight a little farther forward. But when they changed that rule, that rush really sort of disappeared.
Talk to me about wide right. Obviously, last play of the game, and major league long field goal attempt. What was the sense in the huddle before the play?
Well, I can give you the shorter version, or I can give you the whole Adam Lingner version.
I got 34 minutes. So.
Well, when we first got the ball for that drive, what were we down? 1, 2 points? Yeah. And so obviously all we needed was a field goal to win. But what the recurring thought that was in my head was score a touchdown, score a touchdown, score a touchdown. And the drive's sputtering along, and I'm realizing what's going on in my head. I'm scared to go out there to snap this ball. And so I just caught myself in this pattern, and I thought, I can't go out on the field like this, so I changed my mind. And I started a new mantra, which was, you're going to be involved in the play that wins the Super Bowl. You're going to be involved in the play that wins the Super Bowl. And I kept reminding myself that you watched film just nonstop all week on how they rushed against San Francisco to get to that game. And so I knew what they were going to do, so I'm like, they can't come any harder than they did against San Francisco. So I just sort of eased my mind that way. And it was interesting because when I went out onto the field, Will Wolford and a couple of the guys were just talking about how they were just going to come like bats out of hell. And the one thing that you have to worry about when you're protection is when you try to do more than your job, that's when you get yourself out of position and you open up gaps. And I said to everybody, just do your job and we'll be fine. And
Good job, you're going to move on this. Good job, Jim.
The quiet man of this football team, Scott Norwood. He can fire the shot heard round the world now. Oh boy, hearts beat faster in Buffalo. This shot will be 47 yards. Reich waiting for the snap. Puts it down on the way. It's long enough. And it is no good. He missed it to the right with 4 seconds to play.
as it turned out, the snap operation from afar looked good. In fact, people called me, the following weeks after, said, sorry about the game, but your snap was good. And it wasn't even really until probably 2 years after the game that Steve Christie, during training camp down in Fredonia, we were just walking to the dining hall, and he said, Adam, did you know that Super Bowl 25, that the laces were 1/8 of a turn off? I was like, no, they weren't. He's like, yeah, they were. I said, well, I thought I saw on Sports Center, because I never went into the stadium and studied the film. Just too depressing. So oh, excuse me. But I did recall on Sports Center seeing a pretty good angle of it once, and I thought, yeah, the laces were maybe 1/8 of a turn off, but it looked like he turned it a little bit when he put it down. So I wasn't so sure Steve was right. So it turns out it wasn't until Thurman Thomas's Hall of Fame induction reception that I saw Frank Reich. So this is just a couple of years ago. So I see Frank, and I said, Frank, we have to talk. He said, okay, yeah, great to see you. I jumped right in. I wasn't very pleasant. And he goes, I said, about the kick. I said, did you turn the ball? I didn't have to say, Super Bowl 25 or anything. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. He goes, Adam, it was the weirdest thing. He said, I don't know if it's where my face mask was or something. He said, I had no idea where the laces were. I said, well, Frank, I said, that's because as you caught the ball, you can't see them and you can't even feel them because they're in the space in between your fingertips. He said, so I said, unless you would have just figured out, I can't see them, I can't feel them, they must be here, you wouldn't turn the ball. So I said, so are you telling me you didn't turn the ball? It's like, no, I had no idea where they were, so I just put the ball down. Well, what Steve had told me, which I had never heard until that time, I would have thought that I would have come across this at some point. If the laces are 1/8 of a turn off, the ball doesn't tail off at the end. It doesn't hook. It just flies straight. And that's what that ball did. So,
Waiting for the snap. Puts it down on the way.
lost the Super Bowl, not by the couple of feet that it was wide right. We lost the Super Bowl by a 2 to 3 inch turn of the ball.
It's a technique or technical aspect that I doubt if anybody would have ever even known that the process. So when you snap it back, what's the perfect snap back?
The perfect snap is just going to come right across the holder's fingertips so that the if you use the analogy of a clock, so that it's at 12 o'clock.
Right.
So that lace is pointing straight out towards the goalpost. And we had pretty good numbers. I mean, it wasn't very often that they had to, turn the ball.
Right.
So that, so maybe I spoiled Frank a little bit too much earlier in the season. He had never had that ball that was in that little space in between his fingertips.
Well, the one that you do see a lot, and we've had, Frank has been here, as has Steve Christie, the kick, the Oilers kick.
Oh, yeah.
And talk about that particular wild game and the sense that was going on, the great comeback.
Yeah, the greatest comeback in NFL playoff history. I think it still is.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the thing that, that I remember about that, and I talked to people about it, was that I kind of felt like once we scored in the second half, and then we got that onside kick, I started counting on my hand how many times we needed to score to win. I just had this feeling that everybody was doing that. And I teased some of the Bills fans that left the game, is that that's why we won, because anybody that had given up left.
Right.
So I always like to give fans as much credit as I can on the positive and the negative, and whichever way. We have great fans, and but I like to dig them a little bit when I can, and I know a lot of them were trying to climb back in. And
Well, I would have left. We were there and looked at the parking lot, trying to figure out what our odds were of getting out early. They weren't, and so we sat there and little did we. So I'm happy to say I stuck it out.
You stuck it out with us.
Yeah.
Well, at least you're honest.
There's
There's also the story about the 1 million fans that were there at that game.
Oh, I've heard from everybody. I was there. Hey, here, I got a ticket to prove it.
Yeah. Oh, but to get back to the end of that game, though, we obviously. Well, I had a friend that came in from Memphis, and he's now a big fan of the Tennessee. I can't even think of what their name is. Tennessee Titans. And I took credit personally for getting the team to Tennessee for him. I said, the greatest comeback in NFL playoff history. I said that destroyed that franchise. That's why they had to leave. That's why they had to leave Houston and go up to Tennessee. So you can thank me. Sometime you can thank me for having that team in your town now.
Well, it's still one of the great classic games that you see all the time on ESPN Classics, just simply because. They have so much film footage of the Oilers on the sideline, screaming and yelling, "We got these guys, we're burying them," all this very positive, fat lady singing type of stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, you could just see the Houston Oilers just go, what's happening, like deer in headlights.
Yeah. Well, and when you said you had Frank here and you had Steve here, the one thing that's like my proudest snap, because it was a little bit of a blustery day, and if you ever get a chance to watch the replay, look at where the ball hits Frank. Because he said, Adam, the wind's blowing around a little bit, just make sure you don't get the ball high, keep the ball down. And if you watch the replay, it's about as low as it can be and not be hard to handle. It's just like turn the tip of the ball and it's on the ground and ready to go. And so that was really fun.
It'll be a third down play coming up, and Steve Christie is coming into the game. The Bills spent a lot of money to get him, and now he gets his shot from about 31 yards. Bills can win it here. Reich puts it down. The kick is on the way, and it is good, and the Bills have won it. The Bills have.
And then too, I don't know if you can find me on the replay of the celebration, but I run up to Steve and I'm like, good job, and I start running off the field. Like, okay, my job's done. We win.
He gets his shot from about 31 yards. Bills can win it here. Reich puts it down. The kick is on the way, and it is good, and the Bills have won it. The Bills have won it.
It was kind of icing on the cake to be able to hold for the kick and to be there when Steve made it.
So it was really a lot of fun to be a part of that kind of game, because like I said, when everybody started counting, I'm not just talking about teammates, I just felt like everybody in the stadium, anybody Bills fan around the country that might have been watching was just saying, okay, this is what we need, this is what we're going to do, and it was time to get it going.
Well, you do lose track of the fact that when you watch the game in the fourth quarter, all of a sudden, you got yourself back in the game with a lot of time left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, oh yeah.
I mean, it's not as if it was a last second, and then somehow you got a ball back and you did it, so you had some time. Did you steal Thurman Thomas's helmet?
No.
What happened?
I don't know. I feel bad about that, because it's kind of like Scott Norwood. Scott Norwood had a great career, and what does everybody remember?
Right.
They remember that miss. And I was even thinking, after running into Frank, I ran into Steve at Mr. Wilson's Hall of Fame festivities, and I was just thinking, man, we should just get Frank, get Scott, and put the three of us together and tell that story, because that turn of the ball was so much more significant than people know, it wasn't all on Scott. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all had plays we could have made better, so it didn't come down to that, or that it was a 30-yard field goal instead of a 47-yard field goal. But it'd be nice to kind of clear the air for him, I think, because he just recently came to Buffalo to do a card signing. He hadn't done anything for a really long time, and I know he's feeling it. So it'd be nice to sort of clear the air, publicly, so more people understand that it wasn't just Scott that didn't make that field goal.
Right. Anyways, Thurman Thomas helmet.
Oh, the helmet. Yeah, that's where we started. Yeah, and that's I was talking about Scott, because I think Thurman had such a great career, and what do you bring up? You bring up the helmet, I mean, and I've seen Thurman a few times, and he's now back in Buffalo, which is great. And but I know in the years when he was living down in Florida, when he'd come up occasionally. One time I ran into him at a restaurant, and I just thanked him, and I told him how I marveled at him, because somehow he would play at such a high level all season long, but for those playoffs he would just crank it up to another level that you just didn't think he had. Mm-hmm. And he would just do that continuously in these big playoff games. And I also mentioned to him too, that I'll share with you, is that I always took a special fondness of beating the Dolphins. And the great thing about being in the no huddle and beating the Dolphins was that, after a few years of running the no huddle, Jim's up on the line of scrimmage calling, it's 3rd and 1 or 2, and Jim's calling blue 56, blue 56. They've been hearing that call for 3 years. They know that that's Thurman off tackle. And so after the game, Shula's comments, well, we just didn't execute. Well, not that you didn't execute. We told you the play. It's 3rd and 1 or 2, and we just ran it right through your guys. They tried to execute. They just couldn't execute at the level we were executing. So it was, so I shared with Thurman just, things like that how I marveled at him, and how I just loved the fact that we could tell him where he was going, and they still couldn't stop him.
Does he talk at all about that crazy incident?
I've never heard him talk about it, but I'm sure, with Bruce and some of the guys joke with him about it, I'm sure. But
I've seen events where he's been honored, and all of a sudden Darryl Talley, or somebody will come out of nowhere with the helmet. I got found here. I'll give it back to you now. They always kind of bring that up as sort of a sidebar.
Well, and see, like I said too, Thurman's got a unique sense of humor, so I think there's not that many opportunities to bust on Thurman about anything. What have you got on him? All you've really got on him is that helmet. Right. Everything else he did at a really high level, and performed just a great player for many years. So
Marv Levy.
Love Marv did, but he cut me in 1988. He cut me, and he had told me when he brought me into Buffalo that the top priority on his special teams plan was to have the best long snapper that he could. And so when in 1988, when he cut me towards the end of training camp, all I said to him was, "Are you sure?" Which for me was saying, he's not better than me, what are you doing, coach? and I'm not really very arrogant, but when it came to snapping, I was pretty confident. I felt I was, and pretty capable. And so it was interesting because I spent the '88 in Kansas City. They picked me up off waivers and, spent the year there. So I went, back to Kansas City for my 5th year. And after that season, though, was when they did that Plan B free agency. And Dale Hellestray, who took my spot in Buffalo, left for the Raiders. And so I had a chance to come back to Buffalo, which I was excited to come back. I mean, just like you said earlier, exciting things were happening in Buffalo. And Coach Levy, when he called me, said, Adam, when you asked me if I was sure, he said, I wasn't sure. And I really knew that I lost that battle because Dale Hellestray was a better backup offensive lineman than me, not that he was a better long snapper than me, but he could just, because of that, he added more value to the team at that time. And but I was very happy to come back and finish my career those last 7 years with Buffalo.
At one point, you talk about ending your career in 1995. At what point does an Adam Lingner wake up one morning, or the coach talks to you one morning and says, your 200 games is a great run, Adam, but I think that's all they're going to be? Was that your choice? Was that their choice? I
never had that talk because after the season I went and told Coach Levy that I had a good run and wanted to be able to, now I'm going to be 49 shortly. It won't be long, I'll be 50. It won't be too long, I'll be 55 and collecting my NFL pension. And I wanted to be able to walk and run around and, play with my grandkids and be fully engaged in their lives. And I just remember, watching guys like Elijah Pitts, who played, years in the league and couldn't hardly make it through a practice because of his knees, pain like that. And so I just made a decision that my body had enough. I was pretty healthy. And now actually almost being 50, I'm starting to feel some of it. So I think it was a good choice, although it's tough to leave that life because it's exciting, it's financially rewarding. It was a great lifestyle to raise my kids, because unlike today, the game today, during the off season I had a part-time job. I'd go to work in the morning, I'd be home by 1 o'clock or so, had a lot of time with my kids. And because of it, I have a great relationship with my kids and have great kids. So it gave me a lot. So it was hard to walk away from. But I also had 13 years too. So I was in pretty good shape and looking just maybe for a little bit of a new adventure.
Snapping again, you expose yourself. I mean, you're just snapping that back, and you expose yourself to the guy that's going to give you that hit to your head to ring your bell. Who's the guy that rang your bell where you just as soon not have to think about it?
You know what kind of surprised me was that it's a linebacker. Mm-hmm. I could not, I don't know what, Matt Millen just had a knack for knocking me on my butt. And I mean, he was a pretty big guy for a linebacker, but I mean, I'm used to going against 300-pound guys and stuff. I'm like, what is he doing? Am I tipping him off? Is he getting a jump on my snap? Because, he was just knocking me on the ground. In fact, I remember this is when I was with Kansas City. The whole game long, we had maybe 3 attempts, including field goals and extra points. He knocked me down every time. And then we're going to snap a game winner. They moved him over to the guard, and they brought Ted Hendricks in. I snapped the ball. I didn't give an inch. I'm thinking, we're going to win. Ted Hendricks reaches up and just dink, knocks the ball down, and we lose.
Yep.
So
that's not the first time that happened. Ted was pretty good at that.
Oh, I know. They only brought him in, I guess, on the sort of key situations. But yeah, he was very tall, had great reach. But I finally didn't give any ground, and that's the one where they knock it down. I think one of my fondest memories, if you can call it that, was going against Howie Long. Now, Howie was really explosive, so he's a guy you're worried that he's going to hit the gap and your shoulders are going to turn and he's going to be driving through there to get a block on you. So this is also with Kansas City. I snapped the ball. He doesn't get any ground on me. I was really happy about that. He jumps up. I punch him in the chest. He falls on his back. And what was my thought? I wasn't celebrating. I'm thinking, oh my God, he's gonna kill you the next time he lines up across from you, you know. So, and actually, the next time we went to line up against him, it was a final kick for a game winner, and he's hunched over the ball, and thank goodness he had cotton mouth. He's trying to spit on the ball. I'm kind of thinking, well, I'm going to have to ask the officials for a new ball, but he wasn't able to get anything on there. And
did that happen a lot? Did they kind of, there's dirt on the ball, anything to do to sort of create a knuckleball effect?
Somehow that only happened, seems like, with the Raiders. Mm-hmm. Yeah, somehow those Raiders, they just like to stretch the rules.
Yeah, well, that's their reputation.
It is, and I think it's earned, well deserved.
You're in the alumni, Buffalo Bills Alumni Association. I got to ask about one guy who I've never seen back at all, Cookie Gilchrist. What's his story?
You know what? I'd have to ask the guys. I don't know, because I hear the guys talk about him. They talk about him very fondly, but I don't know what's going on there. I don't know if he had a falling out with Mr. Wilson, or if there's something personal that's keeping that from happening. But I'd really love to have the chance to meet him. I wish he'd come back.
Me too. When we get off the record, I'll tell you a quick story about Gilchrist. That is a question I always ask, whether it's Larry Felser, Eddie Abramowski, all the...
Have they had a good answer for you? Do they...
Yeah, it's pretty detailed.
Oh, okay. It's a long story? It's a long story?
It's a very bad-feeling relationship between Gilchrist and Mr. Wilson.
Oh, okay. Okay. I figured it had to be something like that to keep him away.
A sordid story, but he really wants to get paid significantly to show up.
Ah, okay.
I don't think that's in your budget or anybody else.
Oh yeah, for the alumni, yeah. We're trying to raise money. We're not trying to give money away. We try to raise money for local charities, and that's really our focus. And the other thing that we do is just meet and talk about, player issues. But most of our effort is put into trying to raise money for, charities throughout Western New York.
Are you able to keep in touch with most of the ball players?
I have to say that I got a little cynical. When I got cut from Kansas City in 1986, and this was 12 games into the season, I didn't have one player on that team call me. And that was really surprising. It was really tough, at least for a few of the guys. There were a few guys that I thought I was really close with, doing things with their family. It wasn't just work. And so I think at that point, I sort of hunkered down with my family. And not that it's bad, but I think I see guys now, retired guys, that keep in better contact with each other because they built stronger relationships than maybe I did during that time. But I think I looked at it a little different than some of the guys. I thought, well, these are guys I work with, and because of that, I think partly because of that experience. So I think I haven't taken advantage of that as much as I could have. But now, being involved more with the alumni, I'm just, I'm doing more, so I see those guys at the meetings. I actually just talked to Steve Tasker the other day. I've sort of reconnected with Steve Christie, and, so I'm, in that area, I'm sort of a work in progress and doing more. But there was a pretty long time where I really enjoyed it when the guys would have to come back in town for some event. But in between those times, I really wasn't reaching out to the guys too much. Is
that an encouragement of NFL, or is it an encouragement of Mr. Wilson, or is it kind of a separate, the whole alumni aspect of it? Is it
I think Buffalo, as far as what I can tell from other people around the league, has a very good relationship. The team has a very good relationship with the alumni. Some teams aren't that way. I think Chicago's got a pretty strong, alumni organization. But I think as far as fundraising and the things that we do, we've been one of the very top. Although I shouldn't say we, because really it was more the guys from the '60s, and I'm just starting to get back, back involved. But it's really, we're at a time now where we really need some of the young guys to, excuse me, sort of take the reins, because the guys from the '60s are getting up there in years now. So we need some young guys to take over. But I think part of it is just Mr. Wilson's love of the alumni. He's a guy that really just loves the players. Yeah. And it's very obvious, and that's why we get maybe a little better treatment than some of the other guys in other towns do.
Is this the Ernie Warlicks, Charlie Ferguson's, those the guys that really count?
Yeah, Lou Picone, Charlie, yeah, Booker Edgerson, who's actually from my hometown of Rock Island, Illinois. Yeah, yeah.
Do you see, I mean, there's some notable folks who come back to Buffalo, like Thurman, of course, Kelly's lived here throughout. Do you see that as somewhat of a trend? Are there some more of the players coming back?
You know, I think what it could possibly be, I mean, just take a look at Frank Reich. You know, Frank Reich took many years away from football after he got done, and I think there comes a time where you just long for it, you know, and I think that's part of possibly Thurman coming back is this is where his memories are. You know, he had that one season in, you know, Miami, but this is where his football life is. And I think to some degree, maybe some of the guys now we're, you know, in our 40s and 50s, we want to sort of reconnect with that. Frank's doing it as a coach. Thurman's doing it by moving back to Buffalo and starting a, you know, youth football program where he helps develop young athletes. And, you know, so I think a lot of guys are just sort of figuring out that this is what maybe they're longing for. Maybe they couldn't even put their finger on it for a while, but after you've spent so many years in football, and especially with our group that had so much success, it's hard to meet that and match that anywhere else out in what we call the real world. Right. You know, so.
Well, no question that that 4-year run will always be embedded in our area, and anybody who was part of that will be raised to the high level, like Adam Lingner. This is incredible. I'm thrilled that we had a chance to stumble onto each other today. You played 200 games. That's an amazing number of games to play in the NFL. Is there a game or two that sort of stands out, saying that's the one I like to talk about the most?
Well, I mean, the easy one, you know, is the comeback game. But I can't. It's not so much games. It's just little pieces of games, sort of here and there. You know, I really enjoy telling the story about playing against Miami. I remember one year where we were backed up to the 1-yard line. So we're, you know, instead of a 15-yard punt, I've really got a 10-yard snap. And so because we play these guys twice a year, they know how our scheme works. And they know that the guys lined up next to me eventually are going to want to fan out and push outwards. So they put 2 defensive linemen right on top of me. And the idea is, let's just drive Adam right back into the kicker, because these guards aren't going to be able to help him the whole time. They're going to have to go out and get the next guy out. And so I feel myself giving one step of ground, and I'm like, I can't keep going backwards, so I grab them and pull them to the ground. And so I get the flag, you know, which I was willing to accept, and it was a whole 1.5-foot penalty.
Yeah.
And so on the next snap, they just abandoned that approach, and I went down, you know, running down the field, and knew that I just took them out of their scheme because I knew what the penalty was. If I didn't do that, we block a kick. If I drag the guy to the ground, I got a 1.5-yard penalty, and we do it again.
Yeah. Steve Tasker, I mean, you're part of the special teams all the way around. Was he really your leader? Was he the?
Well, you know, I think there were 2 guys. Steve, who played at such a high level for so long and made so many huge plays, but the sort of the quiet leader was Mark Pike. And Mark Pike was just such an exception to the normal human race, because a guy so big that ran so hard and made so many plays, it just didn't seem like, how was that possible? Mm-hmm. I remember early on in his career where they sort of couldn't find a home for him, because it's like, is he a linebacker? Is he a lineman? He was something in between. But on special teams, there was no doubt that he was just a guy that was going to have a huge impact. Would he have been the player that he was without Steve on the outside, and would Steve have been the player that he was without Mark on the inside? I don't know. I don't know. It was great to see those 2 guys on the field at the same time. They both played at such a high level, and actually, almost thinking about it, I think they spoiled me. Mm-hmm. Because I know when I was at Kansas City, I lost my edge when it came to coverage when I came to Buffalo. I wasn't that guy that I was in Kansas City that wanted to make the hit. I was the guy that, maybe it was partly because of the weather in Buffalo, I was so happy to have a good snap that was almost good enough. Yeah. And as I look back at it, I wish I had more of that eye of the tiger that they had, that I had when I was in Kansas City when I was younger, that I didn't let that sort of fall to the wayside. Because those guys, and I like to talk to young athletes about this, is they went out on the field with the intention that they were going to be the guy that made the hit, that made the tackle. And I think in anything in life, that's, if you can come to it with that level of intensity and intention that you're going to be the guy, you're going to be the girl that gets whatever it is done, there's a much greater likelihood that you're going to be that person. And it wasn't that those guys weren't getting knocked down. They get knocked down, but then they get back up because they want to be the person that makes the hit.
Right. Adam, what's a question I should have asked you that I haven't yet? If I had sat down and read the long autobiography of Adam Lingner, and I would have picked up and said, this is what I want you to talk about, what am I missing?
We covered a lot of ground here. I mean, this has been a lot of fun, and I don't think there's too much. I think the only thing, you'd have to go probably back to the young high school athlete that decided, where do I want to go to school? What decision am I going to make? And I decided, even though I was just an undersized lineman from a little Catholic high school in Rock Island, that I was going to try to play at the highest level I could. Mm-hmm. And that was to go to the University of Illinois and play Big Ten football, when the only other schools that were actively recruiting me was Northern Illinois, Western Illinois, Illinois State, good football programs, but not the elite of college football. So what makes a kid coming out of high school say, I want to go compete at the very highest level I can? And that's the one thing that I'm really proud, that I made that kind of choice.
Well, we're glad. The other choice you made was to obviously hang around with Ellen DeTonto. Anything you want to say about Ellen?
Well, I'm just getting to know Ellen, and I'm just getting to know DFT, although they obviously were, the phone company when I went to Fredonia every year for training camp. But I'm really excited about the relationship that I'm building with DFT, because they're encouraging me to go out and do things in the community that I've been longing to do, and they're going to help give me the ability to do that and be a good partner with me on the things that I want to accomplish in the community.